She thought no one would notice, but a dog did the unthinkable. A rich, cold-hearted heiress threw a deaf girl into a remote well. The girl couldn't scream, and the silence seemed to be her sentence. But a dog started barking, and what he did next saved more than just one life. This story will give you goosebumps. Subscribe to the channel and discover how a simple bark unmasks a dark secret. This was just the beginning. The late afternoon sun painted the cobblestone streets of Silver Creek golden, that historic neighborhood of Boston, where time seemed to stand still among colonial mansions and flowering dogwoods. In the most imposing of these residences, guarded by high walls and cascading bougainvillea in shades of purple, lived Eleanor Montgomery Richards, the last survivor of a dynasty that had shaped the economic destiny of the area for more than 80 years. From the terrace of her mansion, Eleanor observed with disdain the distant bustle of Silver Creek's center. At 42, she wore elegance like armor and courtesy like a perfectly fitted mask. Her black hair, always pulled back in an impeccable bun, and her designer wardrobe in somber tones reinforced the image of an unreachable woman that she had cultivated for years. "Ma'am, the documents from the foundation have arrived," announced Martha, her housekeeper for 2 decades, interrupting her thoughts. Eleanor nodded without looking at her. The Montgomery Foundation was her social calling card, the tangible proof of her supposed generosity. With strategic donations to hospitals and schools, she kept the family name intact in the society columns, while the true financial operations, private clinics, real estate developments, and a network of agricultural businesses remained discreetly under her absolute control. "Thank you, Martha. Tell them I'll review everything tomorrow," she responded in a controlled voice, the same one she used for everything and with everyone, a voice that never revealed her true thoughts. When the employee withdrew, Eleanor immersed herself once again in her reflections. Her life had been a succession of inheritances received but never earned. First her parents' fortune, then control of the family businesses after the absence of her only brother. Everything had come to her hands without effort, as if fate compensated with material wealth what it had taken away in genuine human connection. What nobody in Silver Creek knew, what nobody even suspected, was the story that Eleanor kept in the darkest folds of her memory, the existence of Sarah, her younger sister, a girl who was born deaf and who, by her parents' decision, was sent to a specialized boarding school in Vermont when she was just 6 years old. A girl who never returned home, an absence turned into a family taboo, a name that ceased to be pronounced forever. Eleanor still remembered the last time she saw Sarah, her brown eyes full of fear, her small hands waving in the air, trying to communicate something that nobody in the family had taken an interest in learning to understand. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, that memory assaulted her without warning, causing insomnia that no pill could alleviate. The sound of children's laughter interrupted her thoughts. From her privileged position, she could see the small plaza. That extended a few blocks from her property. There, among flowers and stone benches, a group of children played under the watchful eyes of their mothers. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, suddenly interested in a small figure who remained apart from the commotion. A girl of approximately 8 years old, sitting alone with a drawing notebook on her knees and a medium-sized dog with brown fur at her feet. There was something about that girl that immediately caught her attention. Perhaps it was the way she concentrated on her drawing, oblivious to the world, or perhaps it was that air of solitude that seemed to envelop her like an aura. Eleanor observed how an older woman, presumably her grandmother, approached a little girl and made signs with her hands. The girl responded in the same way, with quick and precise gestures. "She's deaf," Eleanor murmured to herself, feeling a pang in her chest. During the following days, Eleanor modified her routine. Her walks through the neighborhood, previously sporadic and distant, began to include detailed observations of that mysterious girl. Soon she discovered that her name was Lily Harrison, and that indeed she was deaf from birth. She lived with her grandmother, Mrs. Rose, in a modest house near the local market. They had arrived in Silver Creek just a month ago, coming from Oregon, according to the rumors circulating among the merchants. The dog that always accompanied Lily was named Rusty, a mixed breed with an intelligent look that seemed to function as a guardian and inseparable companion to the girl. Eleanor noticed how the animal reacted to Lily's moods, how it followed her everywhere, and how it seemed to understand each of her gestures, establishing a communication that went beyond words. One afternoon, driven by a feeling that even she didn't understand, Eleanor approached the plaza where Lily was drawing. The grandmother had momentarily left to buy something at a nearby store, and the girl was absorbed in her notebook, tracing colorful figures with her pencils. "Hello," said Eleanor, forgetting for a moment that the girl couldn't hear her. Rusty was the first to notice her presence, raising his head and looking at her warily. Lily, noticing her dog's reaction, looked up. Her eyes, large and expressive, rested on Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. Eleanor, in an unusual gesture for her, crouched down to the girl's height and pointed to the drawing. Lily hesitated for a moment, but then turned the notebook to show her. It was a colorful landscape with green mountains and a sky filled with birds. "It's very beautiful," said Eleanor, accompanying her words with a gesture of approval. A small smile illuminated Lily's face, who quickly tore out the page and offered it to Eleanor. That simple, selfless gesture provoked in the heiress an emotion she hadn't experienced in decades: genuine gratitude. When Mrs. Rose returned and found the powerful Eleanor Montgomery conversing or trying to communicate with her granddaughter, surprise and distrust were drawn on her wrinkled face. Eleanor, noticing her presence, stood up and once again adopted her mask of distant courtesy. "Your granddaughter has a gift for drawing," she commented, extending her hand to formally introduce herself. "I'm Eleanor Montgomery." Mrs. Rose shook her hand cautiously. "Rose Harrison," she responded dryly, "and this is my granddaughter, Lily." The tension was palpable. The grandmother, protective by nature, seemed to perceive something disturbing in the interest of that wealthy woman in a humble and vulnerable girl. Eleanor, for her part, felt the need to justify her presence. "I run a foundation that supports children with special talents," she improvised. "I would like to offer art classes for Lily, if you agree." Mrs. Rose narrowed her eyes, evaluating the proposal. "I appreciate it, but for now we're fine," she finally responded. "Come on, Lily, it's time to go home." The girl collected her things and said goodbye to Eleanor with a timid hand gesture. Rusty followed them, but not before directing a final wary look toward the heiress. Eleanor remained in the plaza, watching as they walked away. Something had changed within her, something she couldn't name but felt like a crack in the wall of coldness she had built around herself over the years. The image of Lily overlapped in her mind with memories of Sarah, her lost sister, awakening buried emotions that now threatened to emerge. That night, in the solitude of her mansion, Eleanor made a decision. The anniversary of the Montgomery Foundation was approaching, and what better way to celebrate it than by announcing a new support program for children with hearing disabilities. It would be the perfect excuse to approach Lily and her grandmother, to gain their trust little by little. While planning this strategy, Eleanor couldn't explain why that girl had awakened such interest in her. Was it compassion, curiosity, or perhaps an unconscious attempt to redeem the family past? What Eleanor ignored, as she contemplated the nocturnal lights of Silver Creek from her terrace, was that apparent coincidence, the encounter with a deaf girl and her guardian dog, would soon trigger a series of events that would shake the foundations of her existence, forcing her to face the truths that for so long she had pretended to forget. The news of the Montgomery Foundation's new program spread like wildfire through the streets of Silver Creek. Sounds of Silence, as Eleanor had baptized it, promised artistic scholarships, medical support, and specialized workshops for children with hearing disabilities. The local newspapers praised the initiative. Social networks were filled with positive comments, and Eleanor's reputation reached new heights of public admiration. But amid so much applause, one woman observed with skepticism. Teacher Rebecca West, director of the small cultural center in the neighborhood and volunteer teacher of American Sign Language, knew the history of the Montgomerys too well to believe in sudden transformations. "I don't buy that story," she commented to her colleague Edward, while reviewing the newspaper during recess. The Montgomerys have never done anything without direct benefit. Remember how they closed the old community center to build that private hospital that only serves those who can pay fortunes. Edward nodded, remembering those times. But they say the daughter is different, that she really wants to change the family image. Rebecca let out a dry laugh. Different? 5 years ago, she fired me from St. Angel's School when I proposed an inclusion program for deaf children. She said it wasn't economically viable, and now it turns out it's her great cause. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lily and her grandmother Rose, who were coming for the weekly art class that Rebecca taught for free. The teacher greeted them with a warm smile, communicating with Lily in sign language fluently. "How's everything going?" she asked Rose as Lily settled into her usual place, with Rusty faithfully lying at her feet. The old woman sighed. "That woman, Eleanor Montgomery, doesn't stop insisting. Now she sends us gifts, invitations to events at her foundation. She even offered a full scholarship for Lily." Rebecca frowned. "And what do you think about doing?" "I don't know," confessed Rose. "We came from Oregon looking for better opportunities for Lily. A scholarship like that could change her life, but there's something about that woman that doesn't inspire trust in me." The class proceeded as usual, with Lily absorbed in her drawings. She had an undeniable talent for capturing emotions through colors and shapes. Today, she was painting a portrait of Rusty, detailing each tuft of his brown fur with amazing precision. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Eleanor was finalizing the details of the inaugural event of Sounds of Silence. The Montgomery mansion was being transformed for the occasion. Illuminated gardens, luxury catering, guest lists carefully selected from the political and business elite of the city, along with some beneficiary families of the program to give her the necessary touch of authenticity. "Martha, have the Harrison girl and her grandmother confirmed their attendance?" asked Eleanor as she reviewed the floral arrangements in the main hall. "Not yet, ma'am," responded the housekeeper. "Mrs. Rose said she would consult with her granddaughter." Eleanor pressed her lips together. During the last few weeks, she had intensified her efforts to get closer to Lily. Art books, a professional drawing set, even a state-of-the-art digital tablet. Mrs. Rose's resistance was beginning to irritate her, awakening an obstinacy that Eleanor didn't know she possessed. "Call her again. Tell her we'll send a car to pick them up. There's no excuse for them to miss it." That same afternoon, Eleanor decided to take a step further. She drove her elegant Mercedes-Benz to the Harrisons' modest home, located on a narrow street near the market. The house, painted a faded blue, dramatically contrasted with the neighboring properties, evidencing their recent arrival to the neighborhood. Before knocking on the door, Eleanor paused to ensure that everything in her appearance was impeccable. Cream-colored suit, discreet but expensive jewelry, perfect makeup, the image of absolute control that she always projected. It was Mrs. Rose who opened the door, and her surprise at seeing the powerful heiress at her door couldn't be concealed. "Mrs. Montgomery," she murmured, instinctively adjusting the shawl over her shoulders. "Mrs. Rose, excuse the unannounced visit," responded Eleanor with her rehearsed smile. "I was passing by and thought I'd greet you personally, invite you to tomorrow's event." Before the grandmother could respond, Rusty appeared at the door, barking with distrust toward the visitor. Behind him, Lily peered out with curiosity. Upon seeing the girl, Eleanor's expression genuinely softened. "Hello, Lily," she said, trying to remember some basic signs that she had been secretly practicing. Lily recognized her and smiled timidly, making a small greeting gesture with her hand. Eleanor felt an unexpected warmth at that reaction. After a brief negotiation, and against her better judgment, Mrs. Rose agreed to let Eleanor enter briefly. The heiress observed the interior with concealed attention. Simple but well cared for furniture, walls decorated with Oregon textiles, and most strikingly, dozens of Lily's drawings proudly framed. "She has a gift," commented Eleanor, pointing to the works. "She inherited it from her mother," responded Rose with a hint of sadness. "My daughter was also an artist." "Was? She passed away 2 years ago, an accident on the highway. she explained briefly, without going into details. Since then, it's just Lily, Rusty, and me. Eleanor nodded, now understanding part of the old woman's wariness, a grandmother protecting the only thing she had left in the world. The conversation drifted toward the next day's event, and finally, given Lily's evident enthusiasm, when Eleanor showed her photos of the art workshop that would be inaugurated, Mrs. Rose accepted the invitation. "We'll come by to pick you up at 6, concluded Eleanor, satisfied. "It will be a special night." Upon leaving the house, Eleanor experienced a disturbing duality of emotions. On one hand, the satisfaction of having achieved her objective. On the other, a pang of guilt at the trust that was beginning to be placed in her. What was she really seeking with this approach to Lily? Not even she was clear about it. The night of the event, the Montgomery mansion was resplendent. Representatives of the most influential families in America, politicians, business people, and media figures mingled among glasses of champagne and superficial conversations. Eleanor, as the perfect hostess, glided between groups with the elegance of one born for that world. When Lily and her grandmother arrived, dressed in their best attire, a traditional embroidered dress for the girl and a sober outfit for Mrs. Rose, gazes were discreetly directed towards them. Eleanor approached immediately, proudly introducing them to the closest guests. "Lily is our inspiration," she announced. "Her artistic talent is exactly what our program seeks to enhance." The girl, though intimidated by so much attention, responded with politeness to the smiles and greetings. Her face lit up upon discovering the area designated for children, where art materials had been arranged, and some monitors knowledgeable in sign language. Mrs. Rose, initially tense, began to relax upon seeing her granddaughter enjoy herself. Among the guests, however, was someone who observed the scene with particular interest. Rebecca West, who had been invited in her capacity as a local reference in education for deaf children. The teacher didn't miss a detail of the interactions between Eleanor and Lily, detecting something disturbing in the way the heiress looked at the girl, as if searching for something in her. As the night progressed, Eleanor announced a special surprise, a tour of the illuminated gardens of the mansion for the children participating in the program. Lily, enthusiastic, joined the small group. Mrs. Rose tried to accompany her, but Eleanor stopped her gently. "They're with trained monitors," she assured her. "Besides, I want to introduce you to the director of the National Institute of Fine Arts. He's interested in Lily's talent." Reluctantly, the grandmother agreed, unaware that Eleanor had given specific instructions to the employees. The back garden, where there was an ancient ornamental well covered by a grate, was off the tour for safety reasons. The group of children, guided by 2 monitors, marveled at the beauty of the gardens illuminated with colored lights among centennial trees. Lily, fascinated, stopped to appreciate each detail, eventually lagging behind the group. It was then that Eleanor appeared at her side, as if emerging from the shadows. "Do you like my garden?" she asked, momentarily forgetting that the girl couldn't hear her. Lily nodded, smiling. Eleanor took her hand and guided her along a side path, moving away from the established tour. The girl, trusting, followed her without fear. Minutes later, Mrs. Rose noticed her granddaughter's absence among the group returning to the main hall. Alarmed, she asked the monitors, who, confused, assured that all the children had been under their supervision at all times. The concern quickly transformed into panic when Rebecca, who had been observing the situation, approached her with a grave expression. "I saw Mrs. Montgomery take Lily along the path to the back garden," she informed in a low voice. "I don't like this at all. Let's go find them." Meanwhile, in the most distant and shadowy part of the garden, Eleanor was guiding Lily toward the ancient well. The structure, a relic from colonial times, was partially covered by a rusted grate that allowed glimpses of the dark depth beneath it. "I want to show you something special," gestured Eleanor, pointing to the well. Lily approached, curious. The place, barely illuminated by some distant lights, projected disturbing shadows. The girl leaned slightly over the grate to look, held by Eleanor's hand on her shoulder. It was at that precise moment when something changed in the heiress's gaze. Her eyes fixed on Lily's profile clouded with an indescribable emotion. Her hand, previously soft on the girl's shoulder, tensed its grip. Time seemed to stand still. In Eleanor's mind, the image of Sarah, her lost sister, overlapped with that of Lily, and with it, an avalanche of repressed memories. Her father's shouts, Sarah's silent pleas, her own cowardice in not defending her, in allowing them to take her away. In a second that seemed eternal, Eleanor felt the impulse to push Lily as if somehow that act could erase her guilt, silence her memories. Her fingers tensed on the fragile shoulder. A heart-wrenching bark broke the nocturnal silence of the garden. Rusty, who had escaped the vigilance of the employees in the main hall, appeared running between the bushes. The dog stopped in front of Eleanor and Lily, with his fur bristled and teeth exposed in a defensive posture that left no doubt about his intentions. Eleanor instinctively backed away, releasing Lily's shoulder. The girl, oblivious to the tension of the moment, smiled upon seeing her faithful companion and crouched to pet him. Rusty positioned himself between her and Eleanor, still growling, as if he perfectly understood the danger that had been stalking his little owner. "Lily, thank God!" Rose's anguished voice resonated as she approached running along the path, followed closely by Rebecca and some guests who had noticed the commotion. Rusty's bark had alerted not only the grandmother, but also Jacob Mills, the gardener who worked at the neighboring mansion and who, coincidentally, was finishing his duties. Upon hearing the commotion, he peered over the dividing wall just in time to witness the scene by the well. Eleanor, quickly regaining her composure, sketched a forced smile. I was showing her the stars reflected in the water of the well. It's a beautiful effect. Mrs. Rose hugged her granddaughter tightly, visibly trembling. "Why did you bring her here? This place is dangerous for a child." "It was just for a moment, please, don't exaggerate," responded Eleanor, adopting a condescending tone. "The well is secured, as you can see." Rebecca, who had remained silent, evaluating the situation, intervened then. "This sector was explicitly excluded from the tour for safety reasons. You yourself gave those instructions, Mrs. Montgomery." A murmur of concern traveled through the small group that had formed. Eleanor felt how the situation was beginning to escape her control. With the calculated elegance that characterized her, she changed strategy. "You're right, it was thoughtless of me," she conceded, addressing those present with an expression of regret. "I got carried away by the enthusiasm of showing Lily the entire property. I apologize for the concern caused." Her apology, though apparently sincere, failed to dispel the distrust in Mrs. Rose's eyes, nor the suspicion in Rebecca's. Nevertheless, the incident was quickly minimized by the other guests, anxious not to ruin the harmony of the charity evening. They all returned to the main hall, where the party continued in full swing. Lily, oblivious to the tension among the adults, rejoined the group of children, while Rusty remained exceptionally alert at her side, refusing to separate even an inch from her. Eleanor, for her part, immersed herself in her role as the perfect hostess, although inside she was wrestling with a storm of contradictory emotions. What had she been about to do? Had she really considered pushing that innocent girl? The idea now made her nauseous, but she couldn't deny the impulse she had felt in that brief and dark moment by the well. At the other end of the hall, Rebecca conversed in a low voice with Mrs. Rose. "That dog saved Lily from something serious, I'm sure," murmured the teacher. "We should report this." "Report what exactly?" rebuffed the old woman, although fear was palpable in her voice. "We have no proof of anything, just suspicions, and she is Eleanor Montgomery, the most powerful woman in Silver Creek." Rebecca pressed, her lips together, frustrated but aware of the reality they faced. "At least promise me you won't leave Lily alone with her ever again." The party concluded after midnight. The guests withdrew full of praise for Eleanor's generosity and the success of the new program. Apparently, the small incident in the garden had been forgotten amid toasts and promises of millionaire donations. However, when the mansion was once again plunged into silence and solitude, Eleanor collapsed in the armchair of her private study, serving herself a generous glass of brandy with trembling hands. The images of the night repeated in her mind in a tortuous cycle. Lily leaning over the well, her own impulse to push her, Rusty's saving bark, Rebecca's accusing eyes. "What's happening to me?" she murmured to herself, contemplating the flames that burned in the fireplace. A few blocks away in the modest Harrison house, Mrs. Rose remained awake next to Lily's bed, observing how the girl slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger that had been so close. Rusty, lying at the foot of the bed, kept his eyes alert, as if even in the safety of home he perceived the threat that loomed over them. The old woman caressed the dog's fur with gratitude. "You're a guardian angel, Rusty," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened without you." Dawn found Eleanor at her desk with pronounced dark circles and renewed determination. After a night of insomnia and reflection, she had made a decision that she considered sensible. She would increase her efforts to earn the Harrisons' trust. She would increase Lily's scholarship, offer a well-paid job to Mrs. Rose at the foundation, and above all maintain appearances at any cost. No one should suspect the dark impulse that had momentarily possessed her by the well. "Martha," she called to her housekeeper while having breakfast on the terrace, "prepare a basket with gifts for the Harrisons. Include those pastries that the girl liked so much last night, and add the catalogue of the new art center. I'll deliver it personally this afternoon." On the other side of Silver Creek, Jacob Mills, the gardener who had witnessed the scene by the well, was sharing a morning coffee with his wife Teresa in the small kitchen of their home. "I tell you, it was very strange," he commented, stirring the spoon in his cup. Mrs. Montgomery had an expression as if she were in another world, and the way she held the girl, it wasn't a protective gesture. If that dog hadn't appeared. Teresa looked at him with concern. "Jacob, be careful with what you insinuate. The Montgomerys are not people you can play with." "I know, woman. That's why I don't know what to do with what I saw." The conversation was interrupted by knocks at the door. It was Rebecca West, the teacher, who had also been present last night. Although they didn't know each other formally, Jacob recognized her immediately. "Excuse the intrusion," began Rebecca after the introductions, "but I need to talk to you about what happened last night at the Montgomery mansion." For almost an hour, they shared observations and suspicions. Rebecca told Jacob about Eleanor's sudden interest in Lily, Mrs. Rose's initial resistance, and how, progressively, the heiress had been gaining ground in the girl's life. "There's something else," added Rebecca with a grave voice. "Years ago, there were rumors about a younger sister of Eleanor, a girl with a hearing disability who mysteriously disappeared. Nobody talks about it, of course. The Montgomerys made sure to silence any comment about it." Jacob frowned. "Do you think her interest in Lily is related to that sister?" "I don't know for certain, but it seems too much of a coincidence. The problem is that without evidence, our suspicions have no value against someone like Eleanor Montgomery." Teresa, who had remained silent, intervened then. "What if you talk to the family of that disappeared sister? Maybe someone remembers something important." Rebecca nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work. I know a former employee of the Montgomery Mansion, Dolores Wilson. She worked there when Eleanor's parents were still alive. If anyone knows the truth about that girl, it's her." While this conversation was taking place, Eleanor was presenting herself again at the Harrisons' house, this time with a radiant smile and the basket of gifts. To her surprise, she was received with coldness by Mrs. Rose. "We appreciate your generosity, Mrs. Montgomery," said the old woman firmly, "but after what happened last night, we've decided that Lily will not participate in your program." Eleanor paled momentarily but recovered quickly. "I understand your concern, but I assure you it was a simple misunderstanding. The program will offer unique opportunities for Lily, opportunities she won't find anywhere else. My granddaughter is doing very well with the classes she receives. From teacher Rebecca," responded Mrs. Rose, holding Eleanor's gaze without being intimidated. "We don't need anything more." Inside the house, Lily observed the exchange from the window, with Rusty vigilant at her side. Although she couldn't hear the words, she perceived the tension in her grandmother's gestures. Eleanor, accustomed to always getting her way, felt a wave of frustration. How was it possible that this insignificant old woman dared to reject her, generosity. However, she was too astute to let herself be carried away by anger. "I understand," she conceded with a perfectly rehearsed smile. "I respect your decision, although I deeply regret it. At least allow me to leave you these gifts as a token of my appreciation for Lily." Mrs. Rose, after hesitating for a moment, accepted the basket. Eleanor said goodbye with courtesy, but as she returned to her car, her mind was working frantically. She couldn't allow Lily to distance herself like this, not when her presence had stirred up so many buried emotions. She needed a new approach, a strategy that the old woman couldn't reject. Dolores Wilson's house was located in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Silver Creek. At 78 years old, the former employee of the Montgomerys lived surrounded by memories and plants that she cared for with almost religious devotion. When Rebecca and Jacob arrived at her door that afternoon, the old woman received them, with the naturalness of one who has learned that the past, sooner or later, always returns to be confronted. "I knew someone would come to ask about her someday," commented Dolores as she served coffee in mismatched porcelain cups. "About little Sarah." Rebecca and Jacob exchanged looks of surprise. They hadn't yet mentioned the name of Eleanor's sister. "So it's true," murmured Rebecca. "Eleanor Montgomery had a deaf sister." Dolores nodded with a grave expression. "Sarah was born 6 years after Eleanor, a precious girl with eyes that seemed to speak for her. The doctors confirmed her deafness when she was barely 2 years old. Mr. Richard, her father, never accepted it. He considered the girl's disability a shame for the Montgomery name." "What happened to her?" asked Jacob, leaning forward. The old woman sighed, looking toward a window that gave onto her small garden. "Officially, she was sent to a specialized institute in Vermont when she was 6 years old. The family announced that she would receive the best possible education for her condition. But the truth..." Her voice broke slightly. She took a sip of coffee before continuing. "The truth is that she never reached Vermont. The chauffeur who was supposed to take her, Raymond Suarez, returned 3 days later with a different story. He told me one night, after having drunk too much, Mr. Richard had ordered him to deliver the girl to a rural orphanage in Maine, a remote place where no one knew the Montgomerys. He paid a considerable sum to buy the institution's silence. Sarah was registered with another surname, as just another orphan." "My God," whispered Rebecca, bringing a hand to her mouth. "And Eleanor knew about it?" "Eleanor adored her younger sister," responded Dolores. "When they took Sarah away, she cried for days, constantly asking about her. But Mr. Richard was implacable. He told her that Sarah was better off at that institute, that it was for her own good. With time, Eleanor stopped asking. She hardened, transforming into the cold woman everyone knows today." "What happened to Sarah afterward?" inquired Jacob. "That's the saddest part of the story," continued Dolores, with her gaze lost in her memories. 2 years later, Raymond, eaten by guilt, decided to visit the orphanage to see how the girl was doing. He discovered that she had fallen gravely ill. Without adequate medical care, she didn't survive. A heavy silence settled in the small living room. Rebecca and Jacob processed the magnitude of the family tragedy they had just discovered. When Raymond returned with the news, Mr. Richard ordered him to keep absolute silence. He told him that if he ever mentioned Sarah or her fate, he would destroy him. Mrs. Montgomery, the mother, fell into a deep depression from which she never fully recovered. And Eleanor, she was never told the truth. As far as I know, she still believes that her sister lived in that institute in Vermont. "Do you think her interest in Lily is related to her sister?" asked Rebecca. "Without a doubt," affirmed Dolores. "The girl must have reminded her of Sarah, awakening feelings she has been repressing for decades. The concerning thing is that Eleanor has built her entire life on lies and denial. I don't know how she would react if she discovered the truth." Upon leaving Dolores's house, Rebecca and Jacob shared a feeling of urgency. The story they had just heard shed new light on Eleanor's behavior, but it also intensified their concern for Lily. "We must warn Mrs. Rose," said Rebecca as they walked toward the bus stop. "After what we've heard, I'm convinced that Eleanor is not emotionally stable when it comes to Lily. The problem will still be the evidence, pointed out Jacob. All this is stories from the past, testimonies from an old woman. Who would believe us against the word of Eleanor Montgomery? While they debated their next steps at the Montgomery mansion, Eleanor was implementing her new plan. She had convened an urgent meeting of the Foundation's board to approve a special initiative, the creation of a full scholarship for Lily that would include education, specialized medical attention, and most importantly, temporary housing within the Foundation's facilities. It's an exceptional case, Eleanor explained to the board members. The girl possesses an extraordinary artistic talent that deserves to be cultivated in an optimal environment. What about her grandmother? Asked one of the councillors. Has she accepted this proposal? We're in negotiations, responded Eleanor, with a calculated smile. But I trust that she will understand that it's the best option for her granddaughter's future. What Eleanor didn't mention was the parallel strategy she had set in motion. That same morning, she had hired a private investigator to thoroughly review Mrs. Rose's legal situation in the country. As she suspected, the old woman and Lily had entered the country with temporary visas that were about to expire, a perfect situation to exert pressure. At the same time, at the cultural center where Rebecca taught, Lily was participating in a painting workshop along with other children. Her ability to capture emotions through colors was becoming increasingly evident. The drawing she was making today showed an elegant woman with dark hair pulled back, standing next to a dark well. The expression she had managed to capture on the woman's face was disturbingly dual, a mixture of deep sadness and something darker, almost threatening. Rebecca, noticing the drawing, approached Lily and communicated with her in sign language. "Who is it?" she asked. "The lady from the garden," responded Lily with precise gestures. "The one who showed me the dark well." "Did she scare you?" Lily shook her head, but then added, "Her eyes changed when we looked at the water. They became sad and angry. Rusty felt it first." Rebecca felt a chill. Lily's perception, perhaps sharpened by her auditory condition, had captured exactly what they suspected: the duality in Eleanor, the internal struggle that manifested in her erratic behavior toward the girl. "May I keep this drawing?" asked Rebecca. Lily nodded, signing her work in the lower corner with a confident stroke before handing it over. That night, Mrs. Rose received an unexpected visit. Edward Porter, attorney for the Montgomery Foundation, presented himself with documents that, as he explained, represented a unique opportunity for Lily. "Mrs. Montgomery has been impressed with your granddaughter's talent," he explained in a professional tone. "This comprehensive scholarship would guarantee her education up to the university, including specialized artistic training. I already told Mrs. Montgomery that we appreciate her interest, but we don't need her charity," responded Mrs. Rose, firmly. The lawyer maintained his diplomatic smile, but his tone subtly hardened. "I understand your pride, Mrs. Harrison. However, I must point out that your current immigration status is precarious. Your visas expire in less than a month." The blood drained from Mrs. Rose's face. "How do you know that?" "The Foundation always verifies the legal status of its beneficiaries," he responded with studied naturalness. "Fortunately, as part of this program, we could expedite the procedures for permanent residence for both of you." The implicit message was clear: accept the proposal or face possible immigration problems. Mrs. Rose, although indignant at the evident manipulation, felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She couldn't risk them being deported to Oregon, not when Lily was finally beginning to adapt to her new life. "I need time to think about it," she finally said. "Of course," conceded the lawyer, leaving the documents on the table. "You have until Friday to decide. Mrs. Montgomery sincerely hopes that you make the correct decision for Lily." After the lawyer's departure, Mrs. Rose remained motionless, contemplating the papers with a mixture of rage and impotence. Lily, who had observed the conversation from the threshold of her room, approached silently and rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. She didn't need to hear to understand that something serious was happening. Rusty, always attentive, lay down at the feet of both, as if wanting to remind them that they were not alone in this unequal battle against one of the most powerful women in Silver Creek. The next day, Rebecca and Jacob met with Mrs. Rose to share what they had discovered about Eleanor's past. The old woman listened to Sarah's story with a somber expression, confirming her worst suspicions about the heiress's interest in her granddaughter. "Now I understand her obsession," she murmured. "She sees her lost sister in Lily." "It's more complex than that," added Rebecca. "Eleanor doesn't know the truth about what happened to Sarah. She believes she lived in that institute. If she discovered that her sister was abandoned in an orphanage and died there without adequate care, she could completely destabilize," completed Jacob, "and Lily is in the middle of all this." Mrs. Rose then showed them the scholarship documents and explained the veiled threat about their immigration situation. "She has us cornered," she confessed with a trembling voice. "If I don't accept, they could deport us. If I accept, Lily will be under her influence." "There's something else," intervened Rebecca, showing them the drawing that Lily had made. "This confirms what we suspected about that night by the well." The three contemplated the disturbing image. Eleanor next, to the well, with that dual expression that Lily had captured with amazing precision. It was evidence of a moment of rupture, of a dark intention that only Rusty's bark had managed to interrupt. This drawing, along with Jacob's testimony and what we now know about Sarah, could be enough to confront her, suggested Rebecca. "Confront Eleanor Montgomery?" asked Mrs. Rose, incredulous. "That would be social suicide. She has half the city in her pocket." "Perhaps we don't need to confront her directly," reflected Jacob. "If she could see this drawing, if she understood what Lily perceived in her that night, maybe Eleanor herself would reconsider her obsession." "Or it could make things worse," countered Mrs. Rose. "If she's as emotionally unstable as she seems, who knows how she would react?" The conversation was interrupted by the telephone ringing. It was Edward Porter again, informing that Eleanor wished to meet with Mrs. Rose and Lily that same afternoon in Centennial Park to personally discuss the details of the program. Upon hanging up, Mrs. Rose looked at Rebecca and Jacob with renewed determination. "I can no longer remain on the defensive. It's time to confront Eleanor Montgomery and force her to see the truth, not only about Lily but also about her own history." Silver Creek's Centennial Park displayed its characteristic autumnal beauty that afternoon. Golden leaves fell lazily from centennial trees, forming natural carpets over the paths. On one of the most secluded benches, Eleanor Montgomery waited impatiently, consulting her platinum watch every few minutes. At her side, Edward Porter reviewed documents on his electronic tablet, preparing the final arguments to convince Mrs. Rose. "They should be here by now," murmured Eleanor, unnecessarily smoothing the pleats of her designer skirt. "Patience." "Mrs. Montgomery," responded the lawyer in a conciliatory tone, "the old woman will understand that this is the best option for her granddaughter." What neither of them knew was that, a few meters away, hidden behind a group of flowering bushes, Rebecca and Jacob were attentively observing the scene. According to the plan they had traced with Mrs. Rose, their role was to document everything that happened during the encounter, prepared to intervene if the situation required it. At 5 o'clock sharp, Mrs. Rose appeared on the main path, walking, with a determined step, with Lily at her side and Rusty faithfully following them. The girl carried in her hands a folder with her drawings, including a copy of the disturbing portrait of Eleanor next to the well. "Good afternoon," greeted Mrs. Rose with unusual formality. "I appreciate this opportunity to speak clearly, Mrs. Montgomery." Eleanor stood up, sketching her perfect social smile. "I'm glad you've reconsidered our offer, Mrs. Rose. I assure you that Lily will have the best opportunities under our tutelage." "I haven't said I accept your offer," the old woman clarified firmly. "I've come to show you something important." Before Eleanor could respond, Mrs. Rose made a gesture toward Lily, who timidly advanced and opened her folder. The girl extracted the drawing she had made, Eleanor next to the well with that dual expression, and held it out to the heiress. Eleanor's face lost color as she observed the image. Her hands, always firm, trembled slightly as she held the paper. The precision with which Lily had captured her moment of weakness, the duality of her emotions that night, was disturbing. "What does this mean?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "It means that Lily sees beyond appearances," responded Mrs. Rose. "She captured what really happened next to that well, what you were about to do." Edward Porter intervened, trying to control the situation. "This is absurd. A child's drawing doesn't prove anything." "We're not in a courtroom, Mr. Porter," rebuffed the old woman. "We're talking about truths that have remained hidden for too long." The old woman then made a sign to Lily, who extracted another drawing from her folder. This one showed two girls holding hands, an older one with features similar to Eleanor, the other smaller, with a hearing aid drawn with childish detail. "We know about Sarah," said Mrs. Rose with a soft but firm voice. The impact of those words was immediate. Eleanor visibly staggered, having to lean on the bench to not lose her. An expression of panic crossed her perfectly made-up face. "How? I don't know what you're talking about," she tried to deny, but conviction had abandoned her voice. "Your younger sister, the deaf girl who was supposedly sent to an institute in Vermont when she was 6 years old," continued Mrs. Rose. "The girl you loved and for whom you still cry, though you try to deny it." Edward Porter, disconcerted, looked alternatively at the two women. This information clearly didn't appear in the official records of the Montgomery family that he handled. "This is an invasion of privacy," he protested, though without the usual security in his tone. "There's something else you should know, Mrs. Montgomery," intervened Rebecca, emerging from her hiding place along with Jacob. "Something about Sarah's true fate." Eleanor looked at them with a mixture of rage and terror. "Who are you? What right do you have to pry into my private life?" "I'm Rebecca West, Lily's teacher, and what we have to tell you could explain many things, including your obsession with my student." During the following minutes, in that secluded section of the park, Rebecca related with delicacy, but without omitting essential details, what they had discovered, thanks to Dolores Wilson's testimony. The truth about the orphanage in Maine, her father's actions, Sarah's tragic end far from her family and without adequate care. As the story unfolded, Eleanor's face underwent a transformation. The layers of coldness and control that she had cultivated for decades were crumbling before the brutal revelation. Her breathing became irregular, her eyes filled with tears that she struggled to contain. "It's a lie," she whispered, when Rebecca finished her account. "My father would never have done something like that. Sarah was in Vermont receiving specialized education. Dolores Wilson worked for your family for 30 years, intervened Jacob. "She has no reason to lie, not now. The chauffeur confessed the truth to her before leaving." Eleanor collapsed, onto the bench, overwhelmed. The memories she had worked so hard to repress returned like an avalanche. Sarah's silent pleas the day they took her away, her father's stony expression, her own cowardice in not defending her more energetically. And then the years of unanswered questions, of letters that never arrived, of promised visits that never materialized. "Dad told me it was better that way, that Sarah was better off away from us," she murmured, almost to herself. "He said that in that institute she would have friends like her, that she would learn to communicate." Lily, who had remained silent observing the scene, then approached Eleanor. With a sensitivity that surprised everyone, the girl gently took the heiress's hand and looked directly into her eyes. There was no fear in her gaze, only a deep compassion that transcended language barriers. Rusty, who normally showed himself protective with Lily, remained calm this time, as if perceiving that the danger that once emanated from Eleanor had dissipated. "She knows," said Mrs. Rose with a soft voice. "Lily has always had the gift of seeing beyond appearances, of understanding the pain that others try to hide." Eleanor contemplated the girl with new eyes. She was no longer Sarah's ghost, the opportunity for redemption, or the object of an unhealthy obsession. She was simply Lily, a girl with her own story, her own future. "I'm sorry," murmured Eleanor, first towards Lily, then towards Mrs. Rose. "What I was about to do that night, I don't know what came over me. For a moment I felt that if Lily disappeared, the pain would too." "Pain doesn't disappear by burying more pain," responded Mrs. Rose with wisdom. "It only transforms when we face it with courage." Edward Porter, visibly uncomfortable with the turn the conversation had taken, tried to intervene. "Mrs. Montgomery, I suggest we continue this discussion in private. These family matters—" "No," Eleanor interrupted him with renewed firmness. "I've lived too long in private, hiding truths even from myself. It's time to face the consequences." She turned towards Mrs. Rose and Lily, with a dignity that no longer depended on appearances or social power. "I withdraw my offer and my conditions. I will not interfere in your lives again, and I will personally ensure that your immigration status is regularized without strings or obligations." The relief on Mrs. Rose's face was evident, but also the concern. "What will you do now with everything you've discovered?" Eleanor looked toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to hide behind Silver Creek's historic buildings. "I'm going to seek the complete truth. I'm going to visit that orphanage in Maine to reconstruct Sarah's last days. I owe it to her memory." 2 weeks later, a notable change had occurred in Silver Creek. The news that Eleanor Montgomery had temporarily resigned from the direction of her companies to attend to personal matters surprised American society. Operational control passed to a designated council, while she undertook a journey to Maine of which few knew the true purpose. The Montgomery Foundation, however, continued functioning, now with a much more inclusive and genuine approach. As a first official act after Eleanor's departure, the creation of the Sarah Montgomery Cultural Center was announced on land ceded by the family, specifically dedicated to artistic education for children with hearing disabilities. And most surprisingly, Rebecca West had been named director of the project, with total autonomy to implement it. "It's a gesture of reconciliation," explained Rebecca to Jacob during the ceremony of laying the first stone. "Eleanor wants to transform pain into something constructive." In the center of Silver Creek, the life of Lily and Mrs. Rose also experienced positive changes. With their immigration documents completely regularized, the old woman opened a small stand of Oregon crafts that soon became a tourist attraction. Lily, for her part, now attended a specialized school where she flourished both academically and artistically. Rusty, always at her side, had become a kind of local celebrity. The neighbors recognized him as the hero dog, and the children of the neighborhood greeted him during his daily walks. It was even rumored that the town hall planned to install a small statue in his honor in the central plaza as a symbol of loyalty and protection. One particularly luminous spring afternoon, while Lily was drawing in the plaza under Rusty's attentive gaze, a familiar figure appeared on the main path. Eleanor Montgomery, visibly transformed, approached with a hesitant step. She no longer wore her usual designer suits or ostentatious jewelry. A simple summer dress and loose hair with some gray hairs that she no longer bothered to hide conferred on her a humanity that she had never before shown publicly. Rusty was the first to notice her presence, but instead of showing himself defensive, as before, he simply raised his ears with curiosity. "Hello, Lily," greeted Eleanor when she was in front of the girl, accompanying her words with the signs she had learned during her absence. Lily smiled, surprised and pleased by this effort. She showed her the drawing she was working on, a colorful landscape of mountains that recalled her native Oregon. Eleanor sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "It's beautiful," she commented, this time only with signs. Mrs. Rose, who was returning from her stand with some refreshments, stopped upon seeing them together. The transformation in Eleanor was so evident that the old woman couldn't avoid a compassionate smile. "May I join you for a moment?" asked Eleanor upon noticing her presence. Mrs. Rose nodded, sitting down with them. "How was your trip?" she asked with gentleness. Eleanor exhaled deeply before responding. "Painful but necessary. I found Sarah's grave. It was a simple place, cared for by the nuns at the orphanage. I brought flowers, I spoke to her even though I know she can't hear me, and I finally was able to say goodbye." "And your parents? Did you confront your father about what happened?" "My father passed away 6 years ago," responded Eleanor. "I'll never have that conversation with him. But I found his private diaries. In them he admitted his regret, although he never had the courage to face it in life. He was a man from another era, incapable of accepting that his surname be linked with what he considered an imperfection." Lily, although she couldn't hear the conversation, perceived its emotional tone. She tore out a page from her notebook and began a new drawing, working with absolute concentration. "I've decided to establish an independent foundation," continued Eleanor, "dedicated exclusively to reuniting families separated by circumstances similar to Sarah's, and to providing legal and emotional support to parents of children with disabilities." "It's a beautiful tribute to your sister," responded Mrs. Rose. "It's the least I can do," said Eleanor, "but I also wanted to ask for your forgiveness, especially Lily's for having involved her in my unresolved traumas." The girl, as if she had perceived that they were talking about her, raised her gaze and held out the drawing she had just finished. Eleanor took it with trembling hands. It was a portrait of two adult women who resembled each other, holding hands and smiling. One of them wore a hearing aid. At the foot of the drawing, Lily had written with her childish calligraphy, "Sisters always, even when separated." The tears that Eleanor had contained for decades flowed freely at this gesture of compassion and understanding. Lily, with the intuitive wisdom of children, had captured the essence of her pain and also the path to her healing. "Thank you," murmured Eleanor, truly moved. In the following months, a respectful and healing relationship developed between them. Eleanor never again tried to control Lily's life, but became an occasional and welcome presence. She attended her school exhibitions, discreetly contributed when needs arose, and continued learning sign language to communicate directly with her. The Sarah Montgomery Cultural Center was inaugurated a year later, quickly becoming a national reference for inclusion and artistic education. At its entrance, a commemorative plaque remembered, "For all the silenced voices that deserve to be heard." Lily, now 12 years old, published her first book of illustrations, a collection of powerful images that narrated, without need for words, her experience and the transformation she had witnessed in Eleanor. The work received praise from critics for its emotional maturity and its ability to transmit complex feelings through art. In the central page of the book appeared the most impactful drawing, the moment by the well, the instant when everything could have changed for the worse, but which, thanks to Rusty's bark, became the beginning of a story of redemption. And in te, the dedication, a simple but profound phrase, "For those who tried to silence me, today I draw louder than you shouted." Eleanor, upon receiving her copy of the book, hugged it against her chest for a long time. She perfectly understood the message. Sometimes the deepest wounds can only be healed when we dare to look at them directly, when we allow the truth, however painful it may be, to come to light. In Silver Creek, people would eventually forget the specific details of that story, but the image of Rusty, the faithful dog whose bark changed the destiny of all involved, endured as a symbol of protection. His statue in the Central Plaza, inaugurated on the second anniversary of the events, showed the canine in a vigilant position, with the inscription, "For those who bark when words are not enough." And every evening, when the sun began to hide behind the historic buildings, Lily, Mrs. Rose, and Rusty passed by that statue during their walks. Sometimes on special occasions, Eleanor accompanied them, walking not as the powerful heiress of yesteryear, but as a woman who had found, at last, the courage to face her own history and transform it into a legacy of hope. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Eleanor and Lily has deeply moved you. The power of truth, redemption, and forgiveness are transformative forces in our lives. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about second chances and healing. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and human relationships. Have you ever experienced the healing power of confronting painful truths?